but it seems like it's going the wrong way.
Okay, Eric, whenever you're ready.
I will call to order the special board meeting, January 19th, 2004. It is 4:12. I'll have attendance and determination of quorum.
Okay, Director Maynard.
Here.
Director Johnson.
Here.
Director Mendoza has recused himself. Director Kana is absent. Amy?
Sorry, I was just wondering if I could get if you had a couple bottles of water you could help me with. I'm kind of dehydrated.
You got that. And then President Laudenschlager.
Here.
Okay. We'll get
We'll get him in just a second.
Thank you. Sorry guys, I didn't mean to do that.
Okay.
Thanks, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you. Have a good night. You too. All right. Thank you.
you have a quorum?
Any person may address the district board on any subject pertaining to district business which is not listed on the agenda. This comment is provided by the Ralph M. Brown Open Meeting Act and may be limited to 3 minutes for any person addressing the board. Any request that requires board action may be set by the board for a future agenda or referred to staff. I don't see anyone in the audience. So with that, we will move to district business. Item number 1, receive a presentation from David Loya and consider approval of compensation agreement term sheet. Do we have a staff report?
Yes. Now you can read it. The staff report was the same one that was presented when it was brought up 2 months ago. And instead of me reading through it, I'll just do the Cliff Notes version and have David give you the rundown on it.
Okay,
All right,
you
well,
have the floor, sir.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for holding a special meeting in particular. I know our meetings overlap on a regular basis, so I apologize for not being able to break away from those meetings and attend your regular meeting. My name is David Loy. I'm the Director of Community Development with the City of Arcata. I'm here with my colleague Kiko Barr, Community Development Specialist. And we'll walk through this following the presentation that's in your packet. You're going to miss the dramatic effect associated with all the reveals, but you'll get the main points, and I think that's the most important piece. So we're here to talk today with you about a couple properties for our redevelopment agency, which was dissolved pursuant to state law in 2012. And this is kind of some of the wrap-up associated with that. And our main objective is to come to terms so that we can enter into a compensation agreement. So we'll go ahead and start with that. And Kiko's going to kick us off, and then I'll wrap this up, and then any questions you have, we'd be happy to answer.
All right, thanks, David. So to set the context for the proposal, we're going to give you a quick overview of Arcata's redevelopment agency, a brief history of dissolution, the ask in a nutshell, why and how our proposal works, and extra topics as interest dictates. And before jumping into an overview of redevelopment, just to give you a little bit of background. So the purpose of redevelopment agencies was to eliminate blight through development, construction, and rehab of residential, commercial, industrial, and retail. And it was governed by a board which is made up of city council members and run by city staff. The redevelopment agency was funded through property tax. It worked to increase the property tax base through redevelopment, which the agency could further use to redevelop in a positive feedback loop. But then in 2012, the state dissolved the over 400 redevelopment agencies in an effort to meet their obligations to fund schools. And their argument was that many of them were misusing funds, but we're here to talk about our successes as a redevelopment agency. We were one of the ones that were productive with our funds. So going into a couple of examples, just because our record of success in redevelopment is part of what makes our proposal work. So one of our first examples is known as Twin Parks currently, but formerly it was a lumber mill property. And the agency, redevelopment agency, performed environmental remediation and ran power, sewer, and water and built a road. And then it was purchased by Kramer Investment, they built 142 units of housing. Through the agency's work, it was originally purchased at $700,000. Through the agency's work, its current value is $2.3 million, so it was a triple increase in the property tax value. Another one, which you may be familiar with, is Desserts on Us. It's a bakery that sells Lacey's cookies. We took this vacant property in Alder Grove Business Park. The redevelopment agency performed the subdivision and provided loans to Desserts on Us, and they built their factory. And so that was originally bought at $270,000, and after the project, the property valuation is $2.8 million, so that's over a tenfold increase. And just our final example is the Arcata Theater. The agency provided a facade loan and a business loan, and we were able to preserve the Art Deco facade, and they were able to continue operations, adding value to the property tax roll as well.
And I'll just throw in on this one. This is one where it would have been useful to see the before and after pictures. Because the agency basically bought these properties. They were pretty much undevelopable because of the constraints that were on them, bioremediation, wetlands, and those sorts of things. And then what we did was we cleared those sites and made them so that the private sector could develop them.
And so our proposal includes continuing that redevelopment work with 2 properties which are currently in the city, or which were formerly part of the redevelopment agency. Happy Valley Business Park in the north. It is a little bit east of Alder Grove Business Park. And right now it's vacant. Historically it's been used as a log deck. We would like to turn this into a business park, which we'll talk about some more. And Little Lake's mixed-use site is in the south. It's part of just north of the Arcata Marsh. And that is also currently vacant, and we would like to use that as a mixed-use site, which we'll talk about some more as well. All right, and so going into an overview of the dissolution history. So in 2012, the city started the process for the long-range management plan. It was approved by the State Department of Finance in 2014, and then those 2 properties were transferred to the city, where we've been managing them. And we're currently at the step agreement with tax entities. We've been meeting with the dozen tax entities to talk about our proposal. And then once we have an agreement, we can make the payment to tax entities, and then after that, we can celebrate. Let's see. And so, let's see. Yeah, this is that same side. So state law regulates compensation agreements and says that the affected tax entities get a proportional share of the agreed value based on the entity's tax share. And the agreed value is a critical component of our proposal, and we will talk about that in more detail. So we have kind of 2 plans, Plan A and Plan B. So Plan A, this is our proposal. Happy Valley, the agreed upon value for Happy Valley being $563,000. And this is the value that was established in that long-range management plan and approved by the state in 2014. And Little Lake was, I think, valued at $500,000, but the city has garnered considerable holding costs. There's been environmental contamination that we've been cleaning up. There were some defunct improvements that we had to take out, and some cleanup of encampments. So we're proposing to keep those holding costs, which is in line with the other compensation agreements. So that's part of our proposal. And you may ask why we are proposing property valuations based in 2014. So I'll turn it over to David.
Yeah, so this is a question that's come up with a couple of the different taxing entities, as we present this information. The valuations were established, almost a decade ago. And so the question, a natural question arises, well, why don't we, do an appraisal? Why don't we find out what the current value is? The answer is kind of threefold. The first part to the answer is that these property values have gone through a process that was overseen by the state, overseen by an oversight board that was an independent body, and established as the costs at the time. And various things have happened that have delayed us being able to enter into this agreement, but this is essentially what we're looking at for the purposes of a compensation agreement as sort of the starting point. That's where we should have been in agreement in the first place. Obviously, time has passed, values have probably changed, and so the second piece to that is that, and this part of it is really integral to our pitch, our ask in the first place, is that the more money that the city has to front to basically buy the properties back, the less money we have to put into redeveloping the properties. The city has a limited amount of money that's associated with the redevelopment agency to invest in economic development. And what we would like to do is to invest it into these properties. We have a demonstrated record that we talked about earlier. We can show you other examples where we've been successful at this kind of investment. So if we have to take those funds that we're planning on investing in the properties and use them instead of creating infrastructure to buy them back, that's fewer funds that we have to invest in the property. And at some point we get to a tipping point where it just doesn't make sense to buy the properties back. For us to continue with that redevelopment, we'll take those funds and go do a business loan program or do something else. We want to focus on this proposal because I truly believe that this is the largest impact we can have on the community, largest impact we can have on tax dollars, and greatest benefit to our individual tax agencies as a result. And then the third reason is really kind of just the other side of that coin that I talked a little bit about, is that without the motivation of the city to to follow through on the compensation agreement piece, that's what gets us into Plan B, and we'll talk about what Plan B looks like and how that is probably less desirable to all of us than Plan A is.
Mm-hmm. And going through the rest of the proposal. So the rest of the proposal is that the taxing entities would get a one-time compensation payment of 33% now, and would invest the remainder in development in partnership with the city. And the city, in good faith, would invest 100% of the share into redevelopment. And based on our models, which are based on previously doing another business park, we anticipate the cumulative redeveloped tax revenue to replace that 67% invested share in about 7 to 10 years, and then continue to generate revenue.
So I want to pause real quick because we've got kind of a couple of components of the agreement proposal here. The agreed upon value is a critical piece, and what we're suggesting is that we agree to the values that were established in the long-range property management plan with the discount on Little Lake. The second piece is that there'd be a one-time payment up front of 33% of that to each of the taxing entities, and then we would partner. The city would put 100% of its share, because the city is a taxing entity as well. The city would put 100% of its share in, and we're asking each of you to put 33% of your shares in, and then we all as taxing entities partner to do this redevelopment that we'll discuss.
I think put in 67%.
Put in 67%. You get 33. Thank you.
Yeah, any questions so far?
I'm just a little confused about the value, the 5563 and the 200. So in your presentation overview of the redevelopment program, you show the redevelopment purchase and then the sale. So are you saying that you purchased these properties already?
No, and this is where, well, yes, we purchased the properties. This is where the presentation is a little confusing without being able to see the animations. Happy Valley and Little Lake were purchased by the redevelopment agency in around 2010, 2009. We bought them one pretty close to right after the other. I think it was 2009, 2007, 2010, I think is what the dates were. Little Lake first. And so we own those properties. But the way that dissolution law was crafted, it says if the agency has two choices. You can sell the property and distribute the proceeds from that sale to the taxing entities according to their share of the tax dollar, or you could retain the properties, continue to use them for the purposes you acquired them for, and get into an agreement with the taxing entities to compensate them for that property, since you're not selling it right now. So that equates to the city having to buy the properties twice. We purchased them once on the open market, now we need to purchase them from the taxing entities, pay for them again to the taxing entities. And so at the heart of our proposal is that we all as taxing entities recognize that our revenues benefit from higher tax dollars, and that we use our redevelopment skills to improve the value of these properties, creating higher returns on those tax dollars in the future, much higher than they would be if we just sold the properties outright.
After you redevelop them or get them in shape to sell them, where does the money go from the actual sale? You'll be selling them to a private entity, right?
Yeah, and I anticipate that for Happy Valley, we'd be looking at the next 20 years is probably how long it will take us to build that out entirely. And so the individual properties, as those sell, those will go back to the redevelopment agency, and then we would reinvest those in the community. So basically, it's kind of like a revolving fund. When we loan money to you to buy a property, or we sell a property to you and you borrow the money from someone else, we then take that money, it stays in the redevelopment agency, it doesn't go into the general fund, it doesn't go into any other accounts within the city, it stays in redevelopment, and then we take that money and we go reinvest it somewhere else. And we do that over and over and over again. So it's kind of like the difference between a one-time sale on these properties that we will then redistribute to all the taxing entities, and an investment that will continue to be reinvested again and again in the community.
So I'm just a little confused. I thought you were trying to dissolve the redevelopment agency. Was it?
Yeah, the redevelopment agencies are dissolved. What the city did was it retained successor agency status. And so it's a separate legal entity, has completely different purposes, and the efforts of the successor agency are to, one, primarily, to dissolve the assets and obligations of the former redevelopment agency, but there's nothing in law that prevents us from continuing that work with those reinvested funds.
So it's two different entities.
Yeah, the successor agency is, yes, they are two separate agencies,
Got it.
and redevelopment agencies have no legal force and effect anymore. They were effectively turned off in 2012, and then the city elected to be the successor agency to wind down those affairs. So we're, taking care of the bond payments, and once the bond payments, in 2033, the bond payments will be paid, the bonds will be paid, and then all of the underlying tax dollars that are being used to pay off the bonds will also go to the taxing entities. So we're all looking forward to 2033.
Thank you.
And you said, just to be clear, those funds that the successor agency or whoever's within the city's management, they're restricted. They're not.
Yes.
You can't use redevelopment funds to fill potholes or to fund anything other than what that criteria is for. Is it called the successor agency, or is it managed through your community development?
Yeah, it's the successor agency, and the city council sits as the board of the successor agency. Excuse me. And my department has historically run redevelopment, so we continue to do that.
Okay.
So all of those revolving loan funds, we will continue to manage the way we manage our other revolving loan funds.
So can I just give you what I'm understanding?
Yeah.
So you guys bought the properties right before the downturn, and then at this 563 and then the 200, right? And then in order to get the sign off from all the taxable entities in order to move forward with what you're doing, you have to buy them back from us,
Right.
which is this dollar, which, like if you look just at what Arcata Fire is doing, the 5.9% or the 45,306?
Yes.
And then you will continue to redevelop those properties as like a subdivision, and you're gonna parcel off the lots one at a time?
Yeah, the idea would be to parcel off a series of lots, market those. When those fill up, go parcel off new lots.
So you're not gonna
market
sell
those.
you're not gonna sell them as a one and done to one particular developer, it's gonna be small chunks at a time?
Yeah, I think the reason why we want to do it that way is because if we sell the entire property, the highest and best use of that property without the city's investment is as a log bank.
Right.
There's no water sewer out there, there's no power out there. I have a couple of local, mills that are just chomping at the bit to have me lease to them, sell to them, so on and so forth. And so if we put it on the open market, I have no question that that's what it's going to be sold for, which is a much lower value than if the city takes its money, puts in the infrastructure, and then starts parceling it off and selling to other businesses.
Okay, so you guys are gonna front load all the costs to turn it into a subdividable, land use?
Exactly.
Okay, and then you're doing residential and like mixed-use business park for both?
Primarily.
Or just mixed-use business park?
Yeah, primarily business park. I think that, because there are still some heavy industrial users out in the Alder Grove area, it's probably not the best place to put housing.
Mm-hmm.
It's also, for that particular area, you all probably know better than I do, it's kind of like one road in.
Yeah.
So it's not the safest place to put, high densities of people. So that's kind of some of the thinking that's gone into and in addition to that, I think that, city of Arcata currently is probably tilted too far in terms of industrial land zoning. We need to, correct that, but we don't want to lose the ability to do manufacturing in the city of Arcata. Those are generally higher paid jobs than, service industry. And the city has, a long history of creating great, businesses in the industrial sector. So we want to continue to have a place for those folks to be.
Okay. And you think that the turnaround on these projects is upwards of 20 years?
For the total build out, yeah, we think we'll have about, somewhere in the 20s total parcels on Happy Valley. And, I think the absorption rate for that is probably going to be, about 1 to 2 parcels a year once we get it built out. I think there may be a flurry at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of people currently who want that type of property, but there's just none in Arcata. So I think we might have a good flurry in the beginning. I'm hopeful for that. We also have, as you're aware, the Gateway area and other industrial areas that have been, the Craftsman's Mall. There were a bunch of small industrial businesses operating out of there. As those areas start to, trend more towards urban infill, businesses are going to be looking for places to relocate. And so we would be looking to not just kind of hang a shingle and hope that someone comes, but we would actively be marketing to people whose properties are maybe getting sold out from under them, or if they own the property, they want to sell and move to an area that's not going to have residences nearby and that sort of thing.
And then what, outside of selling to like a classic, developer, you would also build to suite maybe for a business? You mentioned that you provide loans for people to.
Yeah, we would not probably build to suit, but we would certainly work to help finance. And that's another powerful piece of this is that, we have a really robust business loan program. We've done this time and time again in the Alder Grove Industrial Park. And we're able to set terms that work for that business, through our underwriting.
Are you setting long-term, or are you doing more of a short-term where then they get more traditional financing and pay you off?
We've done both. We're really, really flexible when it comes to what works for this business. We've got a business loan with Wing, for example. It was about a $2.5 million loan that we did in 2007, I think it was. And we've just held that loan. They probably got equity. They probably could have refinanced and bought us out, but works for them, works for us. We have a steady revenue that we can turn around and loan back out. We have had other folks that we've done more of like a construction loan on, and then they've paid us off when they've refinanced.
And so all of those funds stay within the redevelopment fund, and so basically all of that money would then be recycled back into either, can you purchase more properties going
We can,
forward? Okay,
yeah.
so you can continue this cycle of purchasing, redeveloping, and then also lending within the community?
Exactly.
Okay.
And you guys are in that lending part, you're not affiliated with the, what is it? AEDC or?
They do our underwriting for us.
Okay.
We kind of have a two-step underwriting process, but they do the heavy banking underwriting for us. And then they do the loan documents and then they service our loans. But we're real deeply involved in the initial underwriting to make sure it's the right kind of business for our
But the
loan
cash is
portfolio.
coming from the redevelopment agency?
Cash has come from us, yeah.
So a question that I have about what you've just described is, how does these two properties or this Happy Valley in particular, how does that have a termination point and monies are either paid to the agencies, taxing entities or something? I mean, if this continues to roll over
Yep.
and you're buying other properties, how does that relate to us and what we're getting involved in?
Yeah, there's two ways it does. The increases in revenues, and I think this is one of the flash forward a little bit. It looks like maybe some of the pages are missing, or some of the slides are missing from this. But this kind of gets the point across. If you look on this page that shows the chart, we've got this is total tax revenue. This is basically the cumulative tax revenue over time. And the way that I built this table was I estimated that we had, one property sale every other year, and that property had $1.5 million worth of secured and unsecured on the tax rolls associated with it. And so adding those two properties every couple of years, one property every couple of years, results in a cumulative tax revenue such that the break-even point is about 7 years out. Now that's, basically it's averaged. You may have a project that comes in that's a $5 million project. It might take us 3 years, and then, we come in with another project that is, a $1 million project. But using that $1.5 million project, which is, based in some of the projects that we've seen recently in these larger projects that I used as sort of that are on the tax rolls, that I used as similar kind of projects, is how I use this. So what this does is within 7 years, if we hit that target, within 7 years, the 67% that Arcata Fire put into the project, you've recouped out of the property taxes. If we don't do this project, this is basically flat. We're getting about $6,000 a year forever on this property. And so this difference ultimately ends up to be, tenfold. And so how does Arcata Fire get back that $45,000? It's primarily through the first 7 years of reinvestment in those properties and the taxes that come out of them. And then what happens going forward from there? Everything that comes forward after those first 7 years, those first 10 to 14 projects, is additional monies that you would never have had, even if we said, hey, let's reassess the value of these properties, set a new valuation, agree that that's the dollar value, and split those dollars up. Because that's a one-time hit for you. And it doesn't result in a property valuation growth. Because at that point, the city basically says, well, we can't afford to, pay some pie-in-the-sky, high market value for these and then also redevelop them. We don't want to end up with a piece of property that we don't have the cash to invest in on the other side of this. So we would just go for Plan B if we got.
So I guess
To a
a
point.
question I have, so I'm looking at this table that you're talking about.
Mhm.
You say 22 parcels sold developed over the next 10 years. You had just said doing one every other year.
Yeah, this.
And I guess the either scenario doesn't really matter. What I'm curious about is what's the basis for believing that enough activity is going to be happening with small manufacturers and, whether it's cabinet shops or another Cocatat or Ray Wolf Construction or whomever, because that's what you're talking about, correct?
Basically, yeah.
And what kind of activity have we had in the last 10 years or the last 20 years that would, because Alder Grove's been there now 30 years, 40 years, just
Yep.
about. And so I'm curious what their vacancy rates are and why we believe that the equivalent of another Alder Grove Park is going to grow and fill up in 10 to 15 years with a maximum of 20.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And to point out the statement on the bottom of that yeah, we're planning on, like, best case scenario, all 22 lots would be done within 10 years. I think realistically, we need to look at a 20-year horizon, so 10 to 20 years to have it all built out. The first 7 years, the way that this graphic was built out, it was one property every other year. So within that 7-year period, it would have been 14 properties. And I can't remember whether I put a lag on the first property, assuming that it's going to take some time. So it's somewhere between 7 to 10. In terms of what we've seen in the last 10 years, not much. But the reason we haven't seen much in the last 10 years is because we haven't had property that has been zoned and developable for this type of use, I would argue. If you want to go back 20 years, we're going to see the tail end of the Alder Grove Industrial Park being developed out as sort of a point of reference. But we are undoubtedly having there's a little bit of speculation here. We're assuming that the economy will grow. We're assuming that the valuations for properties in the Gateway area are going to make business owners or property owners start to think about, does it make sense for me now to transition this? AmeriGas is a perfect example. AmeriGas is a very great business in our community. We want to see them here, forever. It's actually very safe. I mean, if one of those tanks blew up, I mean, you guys know better than I do, it would be disastrous. But the chance of those tanks blowing up is so low as to be, not an issue. But it's not the greatest thing to look at, right? So it's a critical need in our community. We want to have it in the mix in our economy. Is that where we want it? No. Can I work with that property owner and say, look, we can move you to the Alder Grove Industrial Park, set you up in an industrial area, and and then you have the property that you can sell to someone who wants to build housing. So those are the kinds of transitions that I see as early adopters, if you will. I've also talked with a number of different people who have wanted to, either build out sort of the small tenant improvement style commercial space, or to own something like that. I'm not at liberty to tell you the people that I've been speaking with, but I feel like based on what I know, there is a market for that. My hope is that we can do, I think it's a realistic estimate that we're going to do about one every other year on the early part of this, on average. And my hope would be that we'd actually be able to do more than that. I mean, I think it's a very attractive opportunity for folks who now are maybe renting. So I mean, it's I can't guarantee anything, but things seem optimistic and hopeful to me. And the redevelopment agency has been pretty good at this work in the past.
And I would jump in and say that, remember, our revenue sources, we're going to see a triple-fold change on it. So right now, as an empty log deck or an active log deck, it's not generating much in the ad valorem, and it's essentially the minimal use as far as our special tax and benefit assessment. The minute it's subdivided, now we've got 20 pieces of the pie instead of one. And as things develop, if it is the light manufacturing or heavy manufacturing, it's even though there's 20, it's not a Furtado subdivision going in. We're going to see a much greater return to make up what's our $30,000 of invested funds into that. So, I mean, when we originally talked about, that's where I went, is the quicker it can get subdivided out and something put on it, we will see, given our three mechanisms of revenue, a better return than if we were a school district and just got a portion of the ad valorem, or the Harbor District is a perfect example. They don't have much out there, I think. Yeah.
So what would be do you have an advantage over developing it than somebody else? Just selling it outright right now, we get our money, somebody else develops it in the same amount of time. That's not really
It's not guaranteed.
right.
Yeah, I think the huge advantage that we have is that we're not necessarily in it for the immediate return on the revenue. We're in it for the long haul and the secondary and tertiary returns on the revenue. We're wanting to see job creation. We're wanting to see business retention. And so because we have those as goals, we're interested in putting in the infrastructure, investing in the infrastructure. Excuse me. I might need a water too. And so, the private market is not going to look at that property the same. Someone who wanted to use it for, a business park is going to take one look at the infrastructure cost, and the pro forma is not going to work for them.
I understand.
What's going to happen instead is, the people who are using it right now to store wood waste, while they wait for someone to come and grind it and ship it to somewhere that's going to, biodigest it, that's what it's going to be used for. And that's the price it's going to fetch. It's not going to fetch, the market that we can, garner once the roads are in and, street lights and stub outs to water and sewer and electrical.
And it's easier for you to do that than somebody buying it outright and then coming back to you and asking that to be done.
Yeah, certainly if there was someone who I was aware of, and if you're aware of somebody, send them my way. Because if there was someone who was willing to do this project on their own dime, I would flip it in a heartbeat.
Got it.
I'd say, let's take the money and run, people.
Right, okay.
I just don't think it's going to happen that way. And I think that, the increase in valuation, even if it doesn't happen over, 7 years like I'm hoping, if it happens over 10 or even 14 years, we're looking at it as a long-term investment. And we're in it for the long run. It's going to benefit not just, our budget this year, but it's going to benefit our budget long into the future. And more than just like, the immediate ad valorem, revenues that we're getting, or, sales taxes, those, people are going out to lunch or whatever. To us, it's kind of like the vibrancy of the economy. Like Arcata's never been a bedroom community. It's always had a full mix of, different activities. And part of the reason why we're so resilient is because, our revenue sources come from so many different sources. And so we don't want to lose that. We want to continue to cultivate that. And that's the reason why I think the council is interested in, in developing these properties in this way.
Thank you.
So what happens if all these agencies don't sign off on this?
It's a good question, and we're having this meeting at a really good point in time. How many agencies have we been to, the boards already?
We have been to 2 boards
Okay.
and 11, and staff at 11, or I guess all taxing entities.
Yeah. So all of the staff are on board. Right now, we're working with the schools to work out a little kink. If you look on the page that has the tables with the different taxing entities, their shares and the revenues, and it doesn't matter which one you grab. If you look at the bottom, this totals up to 68%, doesn't total to 100%. That's because we've taken out the city of Arcata, so we're not in there. We're putting 100% of our revenue into the property.
Okay.
And we've taken out the educational revenue augmentation fund. Are you all familiar with that one?
No.
No.
Okay, so gotta love the state here. Am I being recorded? The
Yes.
the state.
We can bleep that out.
The state, yeah, thank you. The state created this educational revenue augmentation fund to help offset its obligations to K-12 and junior colleges back in the day. This, I think, was in like the 60s or 70s that they did this. And you know, they were having budget troubles. They're obligated to meet the budgets of these schools, but they were having budget troubles. They were looking at all these tax revenues that were going to locals. And so they said, you know, we're going to take about half of your money and we're going to redistribute that to the schools. So the city of Arcata right now is entitled to 15% on the dollar in its tax revenue. And we actually get to retain about 7%. The state takes 8% and gives that to the schools. Same with the county and one of the taxing entities I'm forgetting that's on this list. So there's a couple of tax amounts that we've deducted out because we believe they are not taxing entities in the meaning of the dissolution law. And we have therefore said, look, there's no agency that's associated with this to get into a compensation agreement with, and so we're removing them. This is untested water. I haven't seen a single agency that has done this. They've all added the ERAF in to the agreements. They've all paid the ERAF. But there's, I feel, a strong legal argument and also a strong rationale, you know, just sort of like fairness rationale that the ERAF shouldn't be included or certainly shouldn't be included at the rates that they remove tax dollars from the rest of us at. And so we haven't included them. We're still in contact with the school districts and working through that issue. They've hired a consultant who's telling them you should get this ERAF. We're kind of like, what's it to you? It doesn't really affect their budget. If they take more tax dollar into their revenue, that's just less tax dollar that the state is going to give them. So it's a wash. So we're still working through that. If we have to add the ERAF back in, this will be closer to 100%.
Okay.
It'll include the ERAF.
So then our portion would go down?
No, your portion stays the same.
The same.
No matter what. Yeah, this is.
So the numbers are representative of the 100%.
Exactly. We took the pie.
But the percentage, maybe not so much?
No, the percentage would be.
Or it's
your
just
percentage.
missing some of the other ones to
Exactly.
get it to 100. Okay.
Exactly.
So ultimately, just in your cute phrase of the nutshell. So you're gonna repurchase it from all these agencies or get into a compensation agreement. So our total is the 45. You're asking us to reinvest 30,000 to help you cover the cost of taking these
infrastructure.
things and covering the infrastructure costs. And so ultimately, we would end up with the 14,782, which then is like our one time.
That's the one-time payment.
And then ultimately, we would also be benefiting from the increase in ad valorem as the properties are redeveloped.
Exactly.
Correct?
And our special
And our
tax.
benefits.
Right, well, yeah.
How'd you come up with that number, is that percentage?
Totally arbitrary. Totally arbitrary. Yeah. And you know, the truth of the matter is that, you know, these numbers are arbitrary. They do have, in the final analysis, you know, very little impact. The more that we can all put into these properties, the quicker that they'll be developed, and the more likely it is that we'll be able to make them pencil. And
So this was more just a carrot for some of these bigger entities.
it was a way of saying, look, we totally understand. I mean, I would have loved to have come to you and said, hey, why don't you put all of your money into it, and we'll turn this thing around. I don't think that's reasonable to ask. You all have a fiduciary duty to your agency to ensure that you're getting some compensation, direct compensation out of this. Whether we give you 15 or 45, it's probably not a huge impact on your overall budget anyway. But I think it's a show of good faith, and we're just showing that, you know, look, we want to honor what the state is telling us we have to do. And we're asking for us as local taxing entities who live in this community, care about this community, and want to, you know, do what we can to improve it, that let's recognize that part of our fiduciary duty is recognizing the increase that the agencies will acquire through this plan. So that's.
So
yeah.
I have another question. So the values on these properties $500,000 and $200,000. Is there any money now? So I mean, you're asking us to defer $30,000 and get $15,000. And I get, one of the questions is, well, who's got the 15? Where does that come from? And how much is $350,000 for redevelopment? How far is that going to carry you into dealing with both of these pieces of property to get this ball rolling?
Yep,
And does that money actually exist?
it does. Yeah, so the agency has it's about $6 million
Okay,
that we are going to invest in the properties. And we'll use some of that money to pay these compensation agreements, and then the rest of that money is going to go into direct infrastructure and loans to businesses to move in.
so is that money left over from the redevelopment agency?
It is, yep.
And so those funds moved into a restricted city budget
Exactly.
as a successor entity?
Exactly.
Okay,
Yep.
now I understand.
Yeah, and so you can see, like, clearly, I think you're right. I'm saying that, 15,000, 45,000, it's not that big of a difference in your overall budget. Similarly, 350,000 plus or minus for, a $6 million pot, it's not huge. We could certainly just say, let's agree to these values and buy us out. Again, I think that part of this is just in the spirit of us, collaborating together, really looking at each other as, partners in this effort, as opposed to just estranged taxing entities or, having
Yeah.
a straight deal.
Well, I guess my question was, what's the plan for actually doing the work on the ground, and where does the funding for that come from, and what, because you're asking us to make a decision here soon.
Yep.
And you're asking others, are you planning on having bulldozers out there this summer?
I would love to this summer. I don't think it's going to happen that fast. We do have to do the planning and engineering first. But we do have the funds. Again, it's the restricted bond funds that we can use to do the redevelopment of these properties. I'm anticipating we're kind of like within best case scenario, like 3 months of having all the boards have an agreement. And that's assuming that everybody aligns. And then, we pen the agreement, the lawyers work through it, we have the financial people work through and make sure that the numbers are right. And if we can get through that process, say in the next 3 or 4 months, we would move directly into the, developing the plans and engineering for the property. And I guess I wouldn't be surprised if we're starting to go out to contract next summer to have the infrastructure installed.
Summer after next, 2025 or 2024?
So this coming summer, 2024, is when we'll be under contract, and I wouldn't be surprised if by 2025 we're then able to start issuing contracts to have this work done.
And these properties have a clean, specifically the one, Happy Valley. They're clean and there's no CEQA issues with.
Happy Valley is
I know the other one is in process.
Yeah, Happy Valley is clean. The Little Lake, we're in the process of doing the cleanup. And we also, for Little Lake, there's a little bit of a caveat, and I want to throw this in. I know this wasn't in our presentation to date, but are we still recording? The Coastal
Yes.
Commission is very interested in whether or not the Little Lake property has habitat values. So I'm not sure if the Little Lake property is worth $1 at this point. And so what we may end up asking for, depending on how things go with the Coastal Commission over the next couple of months, is an amendment to this agreement that basically says, we're going to do a lot line adjustment. The idea for Little Lake was always to do a lot line adjustment and carve out sort of the outer edge towards the sluice, so we could do a berm for sea level rise protection with a trail on it, so you could walk from I Street onto the trail, down by the slough, and then back up. And then in addition, on the southern portion of that property, over the last 5 years, 6 years in particular, there's been a lot of interest in a dog park on that property. So we were always planning on carving that piece off and then selling the rest. Whether the rest is developable is still an outstanding question. So if it's not, we would say, hey, let's put that into Plan B. Whatever we can sell that piece of land for, we'll just split the proceeds, because I'm starting to think it may not be a valuable asset.
And just to clarify, you said that in the original dissolution agreement that it was valued around $400,000, and you've reduced it down to $200,000 because of remediation work that you've been doing there now.
Yeah, 500,000. It was like 499, and yeah, so we've applied a discount. I don't have specific numbers to back that up. I went through and tallied it up one time, and it was well over $300,000. And now I'm sure it's more, because that was probably 7 years ago when I did that. And certainly if that's something you're interested in, I can try and pull that documentation back together.
No, I just wanted to make sure that I understood.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, everything from the demolition of the buildings that were out there, the original remediation, because the kiln building had dioxins in it, the current remediation we're doing. A lot of the work has been done with grant funds, and so I didn't include that. I mean, we probably have, a couple $1 million in grant funds, I would guess.
And the Coastal Commission, I mean, this has been not habitat for 100 years, and now they're saying that it is, possibly.
Yeah, there have been some, and we still need to get the wetland delineation to verify. There's some, willows that have grown up through the concrete. It's like literally breaking through the asphalt. I had a very interesting conversation with our local Coastal Commission staff the other day, about the site, because of this. But, ultimately, if they deem that it's, that it's a wetland, or that it's, retain some habitat, it's going to be almost impossible for us to do anything with the property except to turn it into a park, which would be nice, but there's not a lot of value, and that's certainly not what we retained the property for in the first place. So I'm going to be pushing hard with the Coastal Commission to, to get us back onto the original plan. We've already gone out there and done some maintenance to make sure that we don't get any more willows. We whack down the.
They're like
herbaceous
dandelions,
vegetation. Yeah.
Any better than this cherry blossom.
But there are some, the wetland science for coastal wetlands is complex, and it's not as straightforward as just saying, oh, it's a willow, therefore it's a wetland. So we're hoping that, our wetland delineation will reveal that we're good to go on that property.
And it's not something either that you can do a mitigation for, make wetlands somewhere else, and because of that slough that's right there, it's.
Yeah, because it's a coastal wetland, there are like 7 reasons why you can mitigate a coastal wetland, and economic development, unfortunately, is not one of them.
So I had a couple questions about the Little Lake area. And it was proposed for mixed use?
It was proposed for business, yeah, like industrial or.
So not residential?
No, it's in the map vulnerable area.
Okay.
And I think that sea level rise is something that in our planning we're trying not to put more residential down in that
Okay.
area.
So it's industrial mixed use, it would be.
Industrial, commercial, mixed use, could be commercial.
I guess my concern was affordable housing similar to the Sorrel, where we wouldn't get any ad valorem taxes from it.
Yeah, no, that's a good
I mean,
point.
that was the issue that I looked at when I saw mixed use, and I'm going, well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Are we gonna give up and do all this and then have the
For-
properties qualify for the welfare property tax exemption and not get any ad valorem taxes out of it?
Yeah.
So I wanted to have that conversation.
Yeah, no, we do have to go through, the state has created the Surplus Lands Act Actually, it was created a long time ago, but they've recently updated it, and it requires jurisdictions to offer the properties for affordable housing first. And so we have to go through this like 45-day process of seeking and soliciting proposals to do affordable housing on any property that we sell. This particular property, because of sea level rise and the fact that it was formerly contaminated and that, you know, on and on and on, it just doesn't make sense for this to be a housing project. And so if someone were to come forward and say, yeah, we want to build housing on that, we have to negotiate with them in good faith. So if that were to happen, you would see me negotiating with them and having conversations around, you know, what it would look like. And one of our key terms would be you have to go to our city council and get a zone amendment so that you can build housing there. And of course, we would tell the city council that, you know, it's not appropriate to build housing there and we don't recommend the zone amendment. So, you know, it is highly unlikely, I wouldn't say it's impossible, but extremely unlikely that these properties would be built for housing. It's just not appropriate. Does that make sense?
It does. That answers my question on that one. Do you have anything else to present to us?
I think that's it.
I think we covered it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a bunch of extra slides if you wanted to know more about, you know, how we're proposing to subdivide or what the properties are used for, but yeah, that's all. I feel like we've covered the primary bases.
So I guess to the staff report, the recommendation was, from staff's point of view, is to approve the agreement terms for the compensation agreement.
We're doing the motion now?
That would be the recommendation before you do that. The compensation agreement hasn't been filed, so this is just our board would approve jumping on with the rest of the boards to do that.
There's a couple ways you can do it. You know, these, basically we have the key terms that are presented in here, and I think this was in your packet as well, but it's kind of the same outline that you had in the presentation.
But these aren't final numbers. Once the lawyers get involved,
The
and the bean counters, it would be slightly different.
The distributions, the number may change slightly. They're good approximations, but they may change slightly. But the total number is correct. And so basically, if you could do it one of a couple of different ways. If you wanted to say, yeah, we'd like to, go on the record and say that we're good with these terms. We're going to approve this tonight, and then either the next step would be, direct staff to work with your council to, finalize the agreement, or some boards want to see the full agreement come back and then they'll approve the full agreement. That's another alternative. So however, whatever your process is, each taxing entity has a slightly different process.
So can we just move to approve the compensation agreement terms as presented by the city of Arcata at this point?
Which you would agree to the attachment to, and then the other component would be either bring back the final agreement for board approval or direct staff to work with city staff to make that happen.
Okay, I move to approve the compensation agreement terms as presented by the city of Arcata under attachment 2?
Yes.
Is that what you need?
Mm-hmm.
And do we want the staff or do we want them to report back to us?
Either way, I don't think it's something that,
I don't know.
the numbers are going to be the numbers.
Yeah,
I think
they're not going to change.
I think staff can
And
handle
staff, and give
If
staff.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with staff
If
doing
they
it.
change that much where he's going,
You
this
can
is way off, then we'll be back.
Yeah.
But
Okay, I think direct staff to,
Direct staff to
work with the city
work
to
with the city
finalize it.
to finalize it.
I'll second.
Okay. Hey, wait, I gotta take notes.
Yeah, you're not used to doing that.
Have Becky on the phone, taking
Yeah.
notes.
Yeah. Second, Johnson.
Thank you guys for coming in.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Roll call vote.
Yep.
Let's see, Director Maynard,
Yes.
Director Johnson,
Yes.
and Director Mendoza is absent, and Director Arcata is absent, and President Lauslaughter.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
You want to adjourn it so I can?
Oh, yes. Our meeting is adjourned.
You need a gavel.
No, he doesn't. Nobody needs a gavel.
Enough to keep